listening to the Becoming More Me podcast with me, Theresa Lear Levine. You're already enough. But if you're anything like me, you thrive when you're stretching and developing yourself, creating more of the person you feel called to be. This podcast is here to inspire and support you. Let's release the negative, reinforce the positive, and elevate our vibe together as we tap into our limitless potential to transform and grow.
Hi there. Today, I'd like to talk about expectations and this bouquet of them that lead to our disappointments and downfalls, and some really interesting kind of analogies and aha moments that I had over the last week. So I apologize, first of all, that my voice is a little bit froggy. My whole family has been a little under the weather these last couple of weeks, and my voice has been part of what's been up and down. So I'm going to drink a bit of water here while I record, and hopefully I won't get too froggy. But we're coming off of the week of Valentine's Day as I record this, and Valentine's Day can have a lot of expectations on it anyway. But if I'm going to relate this as well as possible to the personal experience that I'm having right now, I have had a month full of so much transition and so much unexpectedness that in the last week, it really kind of culminated with me being in a state of overwhelm. And you guys know that I dismiss overwhelm a lot of the time. I feel that there's a lot of ways that we can cope and prevent and manage things. And oftentimes I don't get into that state. But I also have high functioning anxiety, something that I hope to dive into more specifically in the coming weeks, because it's at the heart of a lot of the things that I share with you guys, and a lot of the reasons why EFT is a modality I love. And yet we haven't talked about it specifically in any of these episodes. So in the coming weeks, do expect some expectations and what to expect here, some episodes around high functioning anxiety and what that looks like, because I think a lot of people live with it every day and don't realize that that's what's going on. Anyway, I got to the point in this last week where I was overwhelmed, truly, where my life was moving at a pace that my mind and my nervous system couldn't cope and couldn't keep up. And there was so much unsureness and uncertainty and disappointment and expectations and high speed crap going on that it was really, really a downward spiral for me. And I think that especially as someone who helps other people with areas of their life that feel like this to get out of them, it can feel almost shameful to get into this predicament, even though it's totally part of the human condition. And to feel like, man, I really should have all of the ways to manage this, to not face this, to avoid this, to work through it in a way that looks a lot better than it did for me. Because for me, it was like tears, meltdown, just kind of losing my crap. And thankfully having my husband here to kind of catch me as I fell and to redirect me and to show me all the ways that everything was unfolding according to a divine plan, that things were okay, that I really needed to give myself more grace and to pat myself on the back for all the things that were going right, despite all the things where my focus was. You know, it's like I say all the time, when we focus on the lack, we get more of that focus, which is obviously not what I wanted. Yet sometimes we can get so magnetized to the negative that it feels really hard to break away from it. So that's kind of the place that I was in. And I can look and see how and why I was in that place and that space, because in the last, well, it's pretty much since New Year's. And New Year's, guys, that just alone, when people talk about a new year, there are expectations that we put on ourselves with that, because it's like, hey, this year I'm going to yada, yada, yada. And we lay all these things out, and then we have to figure out, well, how am I actually going to make that happen? Do I really want it? What is it going to look like? Am I on track so far? Am I already failing? All of these things that come at us, and those expectations can start eating us up. And I wouldn't say that it was New Year's resolution type things per se with me, but during the month of January, I ended up breaking off from the outsourcing company that I worked with for virtual assistants. I made a conscious decision along with that to break off from a mastermind that had been really guiding me over the last 6 to 8 months and to go in a new direction. And I also made a lot of decisions around softwares and programs and things that I was using in my business to go in new directions there too. So almost like all of a sudden, everything is migrating to a new place, or I'm having to train new people to work in my business with me. And these weren't necessarily decisions that I planned on making. Some of them, it was just the right time. Like with the mastermind group, I had felt like I had gotten everything that I really could out of being there, pushed myself in all the ways, learned all the things. And at this point, continuing would have been a comfortable decision, but not one that would be propelling me forward. Yet it feels like kind of losing your compass in a way, because recalibrating everything means having to make new decisions, find a new path, figure out, am I in a position to guide myself here? Or do I need to look for new mentorship? Have I learned what I need to fly on my own? Or is there something else that I could really use to support me? Those kind of things, which take introspection and time and examination to figure out. And I have not been in a place these last few weeks where I have felt like I have a spare second. So I'm also in a place where most of the things that I am working through or struggling with do require that whole step back and really look at what's going on in order to move forward in a productive way. And when it doesn't feel like you can slow down in order to do that, that is where I think a lot of my overwhelm started from. And trying to train new people in order to migrate to these new softwares and everything else, it's just been a lot. And I love to think I can keep up with all the things all the time, but those are just the things that are happening in my business, guys. That's not even all the things that my kids have needed additional help and support with, as they have also been sick, or as they have also had other struggles that have needed a mom's care, assistance, all those things around, or my marriage and the support and, connection required there to make that good. And my husband's had a lot of traveling in these last few weeks. So last week he was traveling half of the week, really unusual too, because I don't think we've ever been apart in our, let's see, in our like 16 years. I don't think we've been apart for a Super Bowl or a Valentine's Day. And we were apart for both. And that's fine. I mean, it's not like those are monumental things where we need to be together. We're not huge Valentine's Day celebrators. I kind of feel like love should be in the air all year round and celebrated often, not just once a year. So, but it was weird nonetheless. So he was away, and Valentine's Day, I had, the kids' cards and all their little things and stuff ready for them beforehand. And it was a school day for them. They were excited. My younger ones still have, the Valentine's exchanges and little class parties and things. The older ones don't really do anything, but I still, shower them in loving messages and try to make it fun. And we had just come off of the birthday weekend of my youngest, who turned 5, and all of that celebrating. So I watched about half the Super Bowl with my kids. We were in the car for the other half. And then we had Valentine's Day, and about halfway through the day, a beautiful bouquet of roses arrived that my husband had sent me. And I was actually rushing out the door. So I opened them and immediately got them in water, like 18 long stemmed, assorted colored roses. And they were gorgeous. And I trimmed the ends. I put them in with their, the powdery stuff, whatever that is, the flower food, and got them situated. So I'm going to tell you about this because I feel like the roses kind of went through something similar to what I'm going through. And there's this bouquet of expectations. And I think that when we receive flowers, there's an expectation for how they're going to look, how they're going to, set up in their vase or as an arrangement. There's an expectation for how long they're going to last, how well they're going to stay fresh, all sorts of things like that. And I trying to think of how I'm trying to say this. When they arrived, they were, as you would expect, fresh roses to be. They were in that tight bud state, and it was just the roses and the greenery. So no filler flowers or, baby's breath or anything else, just 18 long stemmed roses. And so I put them in the vase, and I automatically think of that Anais Nin quote that is, so famous about, and the day came when the risk to remain tight in a bud was more painful than the risk it took to blossom. And I looked at those buds and I thought about that quote and thought, oh, that's beautiful. And I ran out the door to go pick up my son at school because I was running late for that anyway. And then I came back in the evening and I, gazed upon this bouquet again, and the roses were drooping. And I was like, crap, that's ridiculous. They've just arrived. I did everything, I trimmed them, I put them in the flower food, and they're drooping and the edges look wilty. And, this is ridiculous. So automatically I start going into all of these different beliefs and stories that I tell myself about roses. See, I was raised where my mom always said roses were a waste of money. They're one of the most expensive, arrangements and things that you can get from a florist. And she always felt like they don't last, they don't look good, they don't perform as well as other flowers, and they're too expensive. And in reality, I feel like a lot of that was her saying, I'm not worth them. And I carried on a lot of that. Now, I will say I love wildflowers. Like a wildflower bouquet is probably one of my favorites. And I also love things like astemaria and things like that that last a really long time and don't require a whole lot of maintenance and look beautiful for weeks on end, even after they're cut. Roses are not that, but I love the luxury and the elegance of roses. And that's something that I have had to reinforce with myself because of all the beliefs that I've had over the years of, roses are a waste of money, and seeing that really translated more to I am a waste of money. And I don't believe that. And I don't want to reinforce that. So all of these stories are coming in my head as I'm looking at the roses, just hours after having received them and being like, why do these look so pathetic? And, I take some pictures of them. I should really I'll post some pictures of like when I got them and when they look like crap and then what happened next. So I was really kind of depressed about it. And I wasn't going to say anything to my husband. He was on travel, and there, there's certain stresses when he's away for him. There's certain stresses for me when he's away. And I try to keep things as good for both of us in those situations. And I was grateful that he sent me flowers, and chocolates too. And I made sure to convey that to him. And I didn't want to be like, and they look awful already. So I knew he'd be home the next day or 2 days after, and he'd get to see for himself. And so I took some pictures just in case we had an issue and they just like went kaput and we needed to let the florist know or whatever. But in the meantime, I'm still very much in the midst of my like breakdown and overwhelm and just all these things happening. I had a new virtual assistant begin with me midweek that week. So I was preparing for him to come on with me and just working out a lot of things. And my nervous system was shot between being sick and trying to process all these new things. And so I found myself in a very low, like depressed kind of state. And again, getting on my own case about it. Like, you should know how to handle this, Theresa. Come on. Like, let's just go do some tapping, take some time for yourself, take a rest. And I was doing these things. I was tapping. I was taking a nap. I was finding time to just let my expectations go and just be, because that's, to me, the most important thing. We can get really hung up on what we have to do all the time. And we forget that some of the best, most wonderful, amazing things in our life, our business, our families come when we just be and get into that state of being instead of doing. So I also began reading Brene Brown's audio version of Atlas of the Heart, which released on Valentine's Day. So on Valentine's Day, I began listening to that. I love Brene, just absolutely love the aha moments and breakthroughs that she gives to me. And this book has been no exception. I haven't finished it yet, but there have been a lot of aha moments that have really been very parallel to what I was experiencing, very well timed and very welcome. And she talks a lot in there about expectations. In fact, she talks about a situation with her husband where their expectations had kind of gone awry around their time together with the kids versus when she would travel and it would just be her husband with the kids. He felt like it was easier because there weren't any expectations. He would just put his to-do lists aside and it was just whatever the kids needed, he would handle. And it allowed more joy. Whereas when they were together, there was all these, she calls them stealth expectations that hadn't been discussed or expressed, but where there would be a lot of resentments and feelings that they both would have that, man, things are just easier when one of us isn't here. But it really was a communication thing. And I will say that my husband and I have had a lot of stealth expectations over the years. And ironically, over the last few months, we've gotten into this habit of getting together once a week, sitting down and looking at the week and discussing those expectations and what a difference that has made. The expectation that, on this day, I really plan to work, these certain hours and I really need your support to make sure that I can. Or, hey, this weekend looks really busy. So we probably shouldn't plan anything individually because it's really going to be an all hands on deck, go where you're needed and divide and conquer or come together and have a family meal or whatever. And there's not going to be much room for a household project or individual work or even, couples time. And we're just going to have to make it work then. But understanding that and looking at it in advance has really helped me. I think it's really helped him too, because while we're both as good as we can be about putting things on our calendars and sharing them with each other, and also making sure the other person knows, hey, did you see that I put this travel date on the calendar, or that we need to take the puppy to the vet, or that somebody has a driving lesson, or I'm recording a podcast or whatever, that those things are known. There's not always the expressed or understood expectation about what that means. Who's taking the dog to training? What do I need when I'm a guest on somebody's podcast from him and the rest of the household? How are we going to handle the time when you're on that trip and I'm here alone? And yet there's places and times when I'm going to need to be two places at once because you're not here, and helping each other through those things. So that's more of what we've been sitting down to talk about and manage. And a lot of the same things come up where you have to slow down in order to move forward. We really need to take that 1 to 2 hours a week. And yes, it does take that long. We've got some pretty complex situations happening over here to sit down and figure out the week. And we do that down to, what meals are we going to have this week? What grocery shopping do we need to do? Who needs to be where? If there's not a bus on this day, who is going to be the one responsible for picking up the kids that don't have a bus? If there is a bus this day, who's taking the kids to their appointments or their practices or whatever else? And figuring that out ahead of time so that it's not a scurried thing, and so that there's no resentments between the two of us as to what is expected. No stealth expectations. It really does relieve a lot of the tension. So back to these flowers, I saw them drooping. I went to bed that night. I was exhausted. I didn't have any time or bandwidth or anything to deal with flowers. I was just trying to get myself and my kids to bed before like 11 o'clock that night. I know it's ridiculous, but that's where we were at that day. So the next day I get up, and in some time the next morning, I'm looking at these flowers and I'm like, God, what can I do? So again, I get out my shears that I can use to clip the stems. I clipped the stems. Like, they were long stem roses. I clipped like a good 4 or 5 inches off of them. I was like, let's just see if we can get some life into these. Even kind of pounded the stems a little bit at the base after I clipped them. That's a trick that I picked up a while ago that seems to be good at helping them to draw up more water. And I freshened the water that was in there with the flower food, and I kind of rearranged them. I also took some ribbon of my own and kind of tied them up higher in the vase so that all of the heads of them could kind of support each other a little bit better. And because they were all kind of flopping without any, filler or whatever, they were kind of flopping around, even though I put them in the vase that they came with, which had a pretty tight neck to it. I was doing whatever I could to kind of make the most of it. And looked pretty good when I was done. They were still a little floppy, but I made it so that one rose could support the neck of another rose, and they looked better. over the course of the next couple hours after that, they started to open. Those tight buds began blossoming, and they were really looking pretty. And I also noticed the necks were starting to stand up straight again. I was like, wow, they're coming around. You know, they had their period of shock, I think. And, they'd traveled probably, an overnight delivery, obviously. And I had taken them immediately from the truck indoors and put them in a vase. So, but they still had a lot of time it was very, very cold. I think it was below zero all day on Valentine's Day here. And they probably had some shock. So they came, they drooped, they looked pathetic. I gave them some love. I gave them some attention, and I gave them some time. And then they looked absolutely gorgeous. By the time that my husband got home on Wednesday, it was this gorgeous bouquet. And, I let him know, like, hey, I wasn't sure that this was actually going to look like this, because based on what they looked like 48 hours ago, I thought they were goners. But here they are, thriving, looking amazing, blossoming, opening. It's like they never drooped. It's like they're just back to good. And I thought about that with myself, and how, a little bit of time, a little bit of nurturing, a little bit of R&R really, really helps me to revive. And that's what I needed. And once my husband got home, this often happens when he travels. I don't know if any of you have husbands that travel, or situations where you just have to like hold everything pretty much as your responsibility because you're on your own. Single parents go through this almost all the time without the relief of somebody else coming in. But when my husband comes back, a lot of times I have kind of a crash where I either want to go to bed early that night, or I need a nap, or I'm just beat. And like the night after he comes home, I just want to like sit on the couch, watch a show, put my feet up, and just chill, because the weight of having carried it all while he was away, in this case, he was gone from Sunday to Wednesday, just, I finally can breathe. I finally can relax, and my body just crashes. I get the whole, like, the adrenaline dump, and just, I'm done. So that had definitely happened, but I also kind of had an emotional dump too. And by the end of the week, I was teary eyed, I was low. And, we ended up kind of having a bathroom powwow. We have a lovely, huge bathroom, thank goodness. But, we're in there, and I'm just kind of crying my eyes out, and just letting it all out, because the kids were all home and I didn't want them to see it. And he was really a great support system in helping me to realize all the things that are going well, and kind of helping me realize where he is and how he can help support me in, feeling like I'm back on track with everything. Because I do have these goals for this year, but I have my own stealth expectations around them. And I think that was the problem. It's really easy to say, I'm going to write and publish a book this year. And it's really easy to create a spreadsheet that you're going to track your 3,333 words a week that you're going to write, but actually finding the time in your schedule to do it. I mean, legit, there's been none. And I am a master of trying to, cram things in and get them done. And it just has not been something that I could fit in. And even if I could have, I would not have had the wherewithal to put my thoughts together. That's just kind of how blown I was the past week. So I just, I found it really interesting, the whole flower situation, and the way that it really was very parallel to what I was going through. And that right now I feel like I'm in that blossoming stage, and my head's starting to, turn upwards, and I'm starting to feel that re-strengthening in my body, my stem, the flowering, the blossoming, and feeling supported by, the healthy water coming into my system, and the people who are like those rays of sunlight and that flower food for me, that have, come to support me and give me what I need during this time that has been really kind of uncertain and definitely very overwhelming to me. So in sharing that, I really just want to point out how I think we all can get into these patterns of stealth expectations and unrealistic expectations, how we all sometimes need to just admit that we need a little bit of support, a little bit of grace, and a little bit of time to just turn everything down so that we can build ourselves back up again. And how, even if you are the most mindful person a person that practices so much consciousness and mindfulness and release of all of these things that can feel so heavy and negative, how it can still pile up on you, and how that's just part of being human. And there's always room for a comeback, and to come back to that feeling of groundedness and centeredness, and that it's okay if you don't live there 24/7. I think sometimes confusion and depressed or low times, or times when things feel really out of sync, are some of our greatest gifts. And they make us think, they make us get thoughtful, they make us figure things out. And that's usually what we need. And that's okay too. It's okay to be confused. It's okay to have to go through some difficult thinking periods in order to solve that problem of confusion, if it's even a problem to begin with. And that learning how to wrap that up in the love, acceptance, and forgiveness that I thoroughly believe in practicing, especially with the help of emotional freedom techniques and tapping, it's what brings us all back around. And what makes everything feel okay and whole and good again, when maybe even just the day before it didn't. So holding room for that hope, holding room for that growth, holding room for that transition to come through to you, it's a beautiful thing, and something that we're all worthy of and deserving of. So I hope you'll give that gift to yourself, especially next time that you're feeling overwhelmed, whether that overwhelm is feelings of being depressed or feelings of anger, resentment, just everything going out of control. I hope you'll allow for the light to come in, just like it is here if you're watching this video. I didn't close my blinds this morning, and there's just horrible patterns of window panes and bright light coming, but I'm staring right into the sunshine right now, and I'm allowing my soul to just soak it all up, and that feels really good today. So thank you for listening. If you've been through a hard time, a downtime, a frustrating time, or a time where it just feels uncertain as to whether you're ever going to pull through it, please know I'm here. Hopefully there's something in my library of pre-recorded tapping sessions that can help you. And if you're ever having a problem that you're trying to work through and you're having difficulty with, I'd love to hear from you. Send me an email, Theresa@theresalearlevine.com. Tell me about it. If I have a resource, I'd be happy to point you in the right direction. Or you might even be somebody that inspires the next thing that I record to share on social media or YouTube or through my daily and weekly newsletters, which if you're not already subscribing, you can also request that when you send me an email, and I'd be happy to get you on board. I send out emails 3 to 7 times a week, depending on how inspired I'm feeling, and share a lot of things with you about podcast episodes, about EFT, different testimonials from clients, life experiences, my own experiences, and other things that I think would translate nicely and help you in your life as well, whether you are a fellow practitioner or somebody who is finding relief and release through these practices. So I hope you'll join me in the newsletter and be part of my family in there as well. All right. Thanks for listening. Have a great day.
Thanks so much for listening. If you loved this episode, please share it with a friend or post on social media and tag me so I can personally connect and thank you. Until next time, keep taking bold and brave action steps towards becoming more of who you want to be in this world. You are capable, you are worthy, and you are enough. Keep shining your light.